Yes, guys, welcome back to the Tottenham Lens. I hope everyone is well. Bloody hell, in the car at the minute, baking hot. But we move. I hope everyone's well and enjoying the build up to everything Tottenham. Obviously, England's now out of the World Cup. So the main focus now is Tottenham. So we're going to delve into a few things. We're going to delve into some transfer rumours, some quotes that's been said, and just going for a full discussion. So again, subscribe, like, hype the video, drop your comments in the comment section. I want to hear all of your opinions in regards to everything Tottenham. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, not a problem. Disagree, always up for a discussion, So yeah. So first person I'm going to bring up to the table is Luka Vuskovic. So it's been quoted that he's been saying that he didn't feel looked after at Tottenham. And it's a mad one because I can understand why he feels that way. And who knows? We don't know if promises were made in the background, etc. But it's one of those ones where Luka Vuskovic, we all know he's a talent. From we signed him at Spurs, he didn't join us straight away, and then he's been on several loans, and he's done this from a young age. Been on several different types of loans. So I think with Luka Vuskovic, he wanted to be at a club where he can call it his own, where he feels part of the furniture. And I think that just hasn't happened at Spurs. And I think I've said this on my previous video. If, let's say we stayed up in the Premier League, let's say, we went through this whole relegation battle, Thomas Frank was still at the helm, Thomas Frank kept us up. Who knows, maybe maybe under Thomas Frank, or even if Thomas Frank wasn't there and we got Igor Tudor in, Igor Tudor kept us up and then we got a different manager, maybe Vuskovic would still, be part of the plans. Because if we think about Tottenham's history, we have had a history of obviously bringing youngsters through. I guess whether that's through the academy or just buying youngsters who play, i.e. Lucas Bergvall, Archie Grays, etc. But I think where there's been a transition in terms of Roberto De Zerbi, and we've got to think about the whole narrative in terms of managers. Managers' duration at a Premier League team is in around 18 months, maybe 24 months. So, where there's been a lot of money now pumped into Tottenham to now make sure that we're not just surviving, we're up towards the top end. De Zerbi is not thinking about the future. He's not thinking about, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line. And on one hand, I'm like, it's a bargain. We've got decent money for a player who has not played for Tottenham in any competitive game. But also, being a Tottenham fan, we want something to hold on to. We want youngsters coming through, so we're seeing the next generation. I think that helps us as Tottenham fans. That helps us probably as football fans. The fact that we're seeing youngsters come through and we're seeing their journey, their progress, and we can say that, yeah, we're the ones who developed that player, etc. But, thinking about, I was watching Last Word on Spurs and Tom Warnock was saying that De Zerbi is going for that experience. If we think about our change room, our dressing room, there's not much experience in our dressing room. There's a lot of youngsters. So he wants to bring in more, established players, more experienced players who are going to run that dressing room, and the youngsters have something to the youngsters that do stay develop into that, get that experience from other players, and then that way, let's say in 3 or 4 years time, and we have some youngsters coming through, it becomes another cycle and another progress. So it's a difficult one. I totally sympathize with Vuskovic because he wanted a place where he could call home. He probably, he wanted to break into the Premier League. But I think Brighton's going to be right for his development, long term. Whether he gets that move to Barcelona or Real Madrid in the future, fantastic. But I think Brighton will be the one for him. He probably can see a clear pathway because Jan Paul, we've signed Jan Paul van Hecker, and obviously that leaves a room for him to then go straight into the first team squad. Who knows? We don't know what's going to be like. He might have a great, breakthrough season in the Premier League, or he might not. Who knows? But either ways, I do sympathise, and obviously myself as I work as obviously a football coach, and obviously I'm not in the Premier League. I'm not at that high level in the game. I want to develop players. I want to progress players through. But once money's been pumped into a club, results is what then matters. So it's a difficult one. It really is. Now moving on, you got Morgan Rogers. It's been said that he's appreciated by Tottenham, and he would be a statement signing for us. Morgan Rogers would be an absolute statement signing for us. I like him because, again, he's versatile. He can play on the wing, as we saw for him for England, and we've seen for Aston Villa, but also just in the middle of the park. Now, he can play in that cam position, but playing it is beautiful because I think there's an association with number 10s or players who play in that cam position who are players who are fairly lazy. They only come alive when the ball is ready. But I think he brings a lot of even more strength and depth in that midfield. Imagine Tonali, Fernandes, and Rodgers playing as that midfield three. We've seen the work rate of Morgan Rogers. He works hard. He tracks back. He links up play. He's a shooter. He will play balls through. Like, he reminds me a bit of like Dele Alli in ways, when he was breaking through. Rodgers, again, established Premier League player. We've seen him play for quite a few seasons now. And, yes, he will not come as a cheap player. We're probably looking at somewhere 90 million plus, but he will be a great player. And again, he's English, so he's a player I'd love to see at Tottenham. Do I see it happening? Probably not. I know Villa do need to sell a bit, but and with Tillemans going and things like that, I just don't see it happening. But if it did, oh my God, I will be crying with the things that Tottenham could potentially do next season. And then with the squad, you're looking at, Maddison, who can play 10. You got Xavi, who needs to come back and play 10. Like, could potentially play 10. Kulusevski could play 10. We're just going to have so many players who are versatile, who can play across that midfield or wide areas. Like, it's amazing. And the strength and depth will be there. The strength and depth will massively be there. So it's something that, I guess watch this space and we'll see what happens. Next talk is Savinho. Big man Savio, who just liking up all the posts. Every time there's a Tottenham post, be prepared that Savio is going to be liking one of those posts. Recently seen a post of someone asking Xavi Simons, or Xavi Simons, when is this Savinho deal happening? And then he's giving us the emoji eyes. And we've also seen Fabrizio Romano retweet one of his previous posts from back in June, I think it is. And we've also heard that Savinho is the main priority, number 1, number 2, number 3. So with Fabrizio Romano liking retweeting his post, I think that deal is going to happen very soon. I know the fan base is probably split in terms of him. But like I said, and again in the previous post, I think he's got a high ceiling. He's got bags of talent. He just needs a place where he's going to play consistent football. And I think, again, he had a great season at Genoa. He had a nice little first season at Man City. And then obviously second season, injuries and things like that. But it's, again, we know it's not easy breaking into a Pep Guardiola system as wide players. There's been so many wide players out there who just, they just don't do it for Pep. And with the likes of Doku and Semenyo, smashing on the wings so far, it doesn't seem like there's any place for him. Obviously, they've got a new manager in Maresca coming through. He might want to keep him, but I think this deal is going to go over the line. Savio, bags of potential, lots of pace, trickery, 1v1. This deal I think is going to happen soon. We just got to watch the space. We just got to watch this place with Savio. Roberto De Zerbi is obviously been quoted about bringing more experience into this team, and that is something I agree with. We do need to bring loads more talent through this team. We have a lot of catching up to do. So there is no time in terms of just bringing youngsters through. Like I love Bergvall, I love Archie Gray, I love for them to stay. And I think again I said on one of my previous videos, in an ideal situation, we would have had an established midfield. Bergvall, Archie Gray would have come through, and they would have been learning from our first choice, our main choice centre midfielders. But what's happened is they've both come through. Obviously, Bergvall's played consistent football, especially in his first season. Archie Gray's played consistent football out of position. And I think Archie Gray is quite humble and he's relaxed, and I guess wherever he gets minutes, he will get minutes, and he's willing to learn, etc. Not saying Bergvall's not willing to learn, but I think it's difficult as a player when you've played the majority of games, especially in your first season, to then go, oh well, I've got to sit back slightly because they brought in two new big expensive signings. It is difficult. And I try to think about the days when I was playing. Like, don't get it wrong, I'm up for battling and fighting for my place, but obviously I need to know that I'm going to kind of get the looking, if you know what I mean. So it's a difficult one, but I'd love for Bergvall to stay. I don't want him seeing going to Forest. Like, again, he could go Forest, and I think that will be great for his development. We've seen it with Forest. Forest have developed quite a few players, but if it's a case that he's really, really, really willing to go, then you've just got to shake hands, get the right money for him, and then let him go. But from what I understand, the club don't really want to sell him. But obviously, if he's really pushing for a move and wants to go, then obviously, who are we to kind of stop them if they really want to go and they're not going to really contribute to our team. Now we're looking at Jed Spence. So Jed Spence, he's had a great World Cup. There's always a lot of talk about Jed Spence. I don't know him personally. Obviously, you only can go by what you look and you see. Obviously, he's had a difficult Tottenham career. Came into Tottenham, several managers didn't really sort of, I guess, like him. He's gone on loan to Leeds, Genoa, Rennes. He's been on loan to quite a few clubs, and there's always been sort of discussions around his attitude, etc. And maybe it is his attitude. Maybe it's the managers who, they're not able to get the best out of him, because sometimes that is the case. Not all players just come into a club and you're able to get, they vibe with what's going on. There has to be a bit of give and take as well. The manager has to be able to get the best out of the player, and that comes down to the manager getting to know that player and finding the best way to get it out of them. So he's had a difficult start, and obviously he broke into the Tottenham team, especially via injury, because especially last 2-3 seasons we've had loads and loads and loads of injuries, which has not helped us whatsoever. But there's been loads of times he's worked hard for Tottenham. He's worked hard for England in this World Cup, playing at left back, even though he's a good little alternative, if you're going through an injury crisis, but he's not a left back. And from what I understand, Tottenham, they don't want to sell him. But if a good offer comes through, that could lead to a sell. Now, obviously, Everton are interested in him. Inter Milan are interested in him. I think there's been reports that it could be around sort of like the 45 million mark or 40 million mark. But for Inter Milan, that's a bit out of his range. So who knows? We might see a deal go through where it's a loan with an obligation to buy in the future. We just don't know. For me personally, I would keep Jed Spence. I want him back at that right back position, his natural position. We've got strength and depth. We've got the likes of Udogie. Obviously, he's going through his injury problems, but I think with the fact that we've got Andy Robertson, it helps a lot because it allows Udogie to free up himself in terms of like there's not too much pressure on him in terms of obviously having to play every single game. Same thing with Spence having to play every single game at left back when we didn't have that cover. So I think it'll be a nice little challenge for him against Porro on the right. They both offer two different things. I think Pedro Porro, we've seen in the World Cup, he can defend. A lot of people, are slandering him saying that he can't defend, etc. But I think Tottenham as a whole, if we look at the bigger picture, we've been crap defensively. So we can't really turn around and blame it down on Pedro Porro. But we've seen in the World Cup, Pedro Porro knows how to defend. He also knows how to attack. Jed Spence, he's a better defender than he is going forward. I think he can get forward in terms of breaking, his line breaking pace, and beating players and beating through lines. But obviously his end product, we need to look at in terms of how he can be better. But again, I would look to keep them in my squad. I want to keep them both in my squad. I think that again, strength and depth allows for a lot of rotation in cups, in the league, etc., and keeps the players on their toes, knowing that there's somebody, sniffing behind them, trying to gain, that start. So again, something to watch out for. Obviously, Nico Williams again is we've been linked to him, but the reports are saying that he's going to be signing, and he's in an advanced position to sign a new contract with Nottingham Forest. So that sort of puts him aside. But again, it makes me think as well, who do we bring in? Drop it in the comment section. If Jed Spence was to leave tomorrow, who do we bring in as a right back who's going to add competition to Pedro Porro? Please drop it in the comments. I want to know. This is education for myself. I want to know other right backs who could add that competition to our squad. And we move on to, Vicario. Now, Vicario, when he joined Tottenham, there's been a lot of talks about him. I had high hopes for him. I felt, he needed a better time to adjust, and he's played in the Premier League for a while now. He's been with us for 3-4 seasons? Can't remember top of my head, but it just hasn't worked. I think he hasn't, adjusted to the physicality of the Premier League and how quick it is. Good little shot stopper, but there's just been too many mistakes. And obviously, if we're going to be a team where we're going to be playing out from the back and like baiting the press, that doesn't suit his strengths. It really doesn't. We're just going to be hanging him out to dry every week. And I know we only have a small sample size on Kingsley. Obviously, Kingsley's had he had obviously a troublesome time in Madrid. And then he went on, a long period of time, 7 games, 8 games, where he got to play first team football, and he done a great job. I'm not saying that he's the real deal in terms of he's our number one. That's it. We don't need to buy a goalkeeper, but yeah, he deserves a chance. Kingsley deserves a chance. I think Vicario, I think his time's done. With us, I think the fan base are probably, fed up with him to a certain degree. No one can doubt Vicario's passion. He has a lot of passion, a lot of love for the game. We see that every game, that he is very passionate about the game. He wants to win, etc. I just think it just hasn't worked out, and especially when you've had a goalkeeper such as, Lloris before him, who, he was a good servant for us. Vicario hasn't sort of almost like lived up to that standard. So yeah, Vicario, I think he's touted at about 25 million in terms of going. Juventus heavily interested. I think they've opened talks. But I think to a certain degree, I think that fee could be negotiated. It could be a package where they offer slightly less, and maybe it comes with add-ons, or it could be a situation where it's an obligation to buy. It's a loan without obligation to buy. Again, it's time. I think if we're holding on to Vicario again for another season and he's not playing, that fee's just going down. So it's a bit like, then Katesha, what he said is, we need to know when it's time to sell players, especially at their highest value. This is that time. I think we need to sell him. Thank you for your service. You have had great times for us, and helped support us in terms of winning the Europa League. But I do think it's time for him to step aside, and we move forward. I do think with Kingsley, looks to be the number one. I think with Kingsley, I think he's on probation. That's the best way to put it. I think he's on probation in the sense of, from month to month, he will be assessed. Yes, he has the traits and the skill set to fit into the De Zerbi system, but I think, he will be assessed month to month. There might be a first probation stage up to January. If he's not cutting it, maybe January we'll start looking at a keeper that we could potentially bring in. Maybe we look at Trafford's situation. If again he passed that first probation period, goes into the summer. Again, if it's not up to scratch, then maybe we do look to bring in a goalkeeper. But he could be that youngster that we develop to be a solid number one in the Premier League. So again, watch the space. We'll see. We'll see what happens there with Kingsley and obviously, Vicario. Oh man, Tottenham. So Wednesday we have our first pre-season game, and that's against MK Dons. Obviously, there's a lot of players still coming back from the World Cup, so it will be a different Tottenham look. Not too sure what time the game kicks off. I think at the moment it's like a T to be confirmed. It's on Spurs play, from my understanding, and I think it'll be a nice little watch just to start to see how certain things have been incorporated. We get to potentially have a look at some of these youngsters like Mikey Moore, Byfield, Will Lancashire, Dane Scarlett. Again, it's a good chance for Roberto De Zerbi to make a decision whether these are players that we keep over the season, or whether they need to go on another loan and really develop their skill set. So it'll be interesting to see, but we'll go from there. But yeah, guys, if you like this video, like, subscribe, make sure that you drop your comments in the comments section. Thank you very much for everyone who's subscribing. Thank you very much to everyone who's liking the videos. Honestly, guys, it's amazing being able to present news to you, get discussions. Love Tottenham. It's my team, even though I'm wearing a Jamaica kit. One of the kits what I wish was in the World Cup, but it hasn't happened. Guys, peace and love to you all. Hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you guys soon. Peace.